Hello and welcome to Random Offense, where we explore the overlap between sports, culture, and sometimes politics. This is a special episode because I'm not even sure if we're really going to get to the sports of it all. It's the Jimmy Kimmel episode, as it were, or the Jimmy Kimmel versus Trump episode, as it is. We will be joined by the great Mike Pesca of The Gist, a man who can pontificate on anything happening in culture. Cannot wait to bring him in here. Obviously, we can get questions from you via the Zoom. You can ask away if we deem it worthy. So I believe on this particular topic that I actually have an angle on it that other people don't have. I rarely say that. You might be hearing that and think this person is arrogant. Maybe I am. But I actually think that just through the randomness of sourcing, I have an angle on that. I'm going to tease it. I'm going to say that I have a little bit of that explored so far in my Substack, House of Strauss. So that is what I'm teasing, but I'm not teasing it before giving you a fantastic exposition, one that I am not good at, one that I need a trained radio professional to do. That would be Mike Pesca. That would be somebody that I am offloading this duty onto. Can we bring him to the stage? Can we bring Mike to the stage and get him to exposit? Get him to explain the Jimmy Kimmel situation, and then we can get right on into it. Mike, you are muted. Are you muted? Are you muted? Can we get you? Oh, no. He looks good. He's in a black shirt. He looks like a tech
Is that
overlord.
A problem? You want me to
No, we see you. We hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Do we have technical difficulties?
I can hear both of you.
Good if I can hear you.
You know, the irony of this is that I think Mike and I can both just talk our asses off, and we might not even need to listen to each other to do a credible, capable show. But if you will be patient with me, be patient with us, we can bring Mike on. Interesting. Okay. So let's try this. Before getting Mike on, actually, can we bring Mays on? Just so I can riff with somebody. I can bring somebody up to the stage. Can I bring Anthony Mays? My trusty Anthony Mays.
Hello.
Thank you, Anthony. We're going to get Mike on. We are going to figure it out. Okay. I just need you for the comfort. I need another body here. I'm not Jim Rome. I'm not Jim Rome. I can't just monologue. So let me...
You don't want to cowherd this?
You know, there are people who are solo acts, and there are people who are members of an ensemble.
Preach.
I'm more of an ensemble act. Truthfully told. Here's what I will say. I'll get into what I teased, right? Before we get into the whole Jimmy Kimmel of it. Right now, there's this battle happening. Kimmel has been suspended. The ABC affiliates have moved against him because of a comment he made about the assassin of Charlie Kirk. We're going to get into that. We're going to explore a lot of it. But the specific angle that I have right now, Maze, that I don't think people have a proper appreciation for, is that the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, who appeared to be threatening Kimmel and ABC by saying we can do this the easy way or the hard way. He went on Fox News. He said that. I think the perspective is that Brendan Carr is just this Trump sycophant, and he's making these moves and trying to punish Kimmel because Kimmel said bad things about Trump. And I think that's missing something. I actually don't think the people who object to what's happened are going to be comforted by what I'm saying, but it's just a different understanding of it. Brendan Carr has his own vision. Brendan Carr is not sucking up to Trump as a means to an end of sucking up to Trump and just staying in the fold. He's sucking up to Trump to try to accomplish a media vision. He wants to break up what he perceives as the liberal network media monopoly. And this is how he's asserting his leverage to do it. So that's what I have through my sourcing, Anthony. That's what I'm saying, is that there's a bit of, I don't know if you want to call it rogueness to it, but it's that the FCC commissioner is using his position within the Trump administration, using flattery of Trump, Mike Pesca, if you can hear me, and I'm not sure if you can.
I can.
To try to accomplish his particular vision. Mays, get the hell out of here. We have Mike now. We have the guest. But thank you for saving me. Thank you for saving me there, Anthony.
Was he my stand-in? Was he to set lighting levels and such?
How are you doing, Mike? Can you do me the tremendous favor, now that we've made it through the technical difficulties, of giving us a good expository on what the hell the Jimmy Kimmel Michigas is.
Yes, Michigas slash pretty blatant violation of First Amendment. So here we go. Monday is Kimmel's first day back since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He says only two things that could be interpreted as offensive. We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. So let's pause on that. He then mocked Trump's morning because Trump would ask a question about Kirk and pivoted to talking about his new ballroom. So Kimmel is wrong. He's not a newsman. It's a premise for a joke, right? It's a subordinate clause in a setup for a joke, which
Quick
if we don't allow.
Quick interjection. Joke was pretty funny. The goldfish joke that he segued to was pretty funny. I just wanted to get that in there. It's important that we do that. Okay.
Yes.
Continue.
Yeah. And even the cut, it's very satisfying to see the president say ridiculous things and then have a comedian mock them for being ridiculous. I've never objected to that if the mockery is good for any president or anyone. And what Trump literally asked, are you all broken up about Charlie Kirk? He's like, oh, yeah, sure. Let me talk about my ballroom. It was funny. I hadn't seen that clip.
Yeah.
So it is odd that Kimmel on Monday would be asserting, oh, they're desperately trying to say it wasn't MAGA. So maybe it's worth a couple of minutes. And you tell me if you want to do that now, or we could.
Yeah, let's play the Kimmel clip, the clip that triggered the suspension. I want to see it. I want to react to it in a naturalistic manner. So let's get that up there.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Okay. And then he segues into the goldfish thing. The goldfish joke, I thought was funny. I don't think what he was doing right there before it was funny. And I actually think, Mike, because people are outraged about the government getting involved in this and asserting leverage, jawboning, for instance, I do think there's an impulse to perhaps understate the offense of the comment, because that's just how we have these cancellation conversations where it almost seems like if you're talking about how offensive it is, you're implicitly suggesting that a punishment should follow. And my take on it is I don't want anybody fired for any offhanded comment. I feel like any sort of just extemporaneous or even planned a comment you make, you should be able to walk it back. I don't want to live in the society where somebody says something wrong and they just get booted off the stage and that's that. I don't think that's comfortable. I think we want people's honesty. But I've seen a lot of people, Mike, just have a blind spot to how this could really piss people off. Yeah, Bill Carter, the great Bill Carter, who wrote about the late night wars. He was on Matt Bellany's podcast. And I had to regard him as somebody who is in a deep blue bubble, even though I think he has expertise and knowledge of the television industry, because he seemed utterly perplexed as to why anybody could find this at all offensive. He said, well, he didn't criticize Charlie Kirk. And it's, look. Jimmy Kimmel was suggesting that the person who killed this beloved figure of this movement, the perhaps most popular conservative activist, was indeed a fellow conservative. I feel like that's obviously something that's going to piss people off if they're invested in that movement and they're really angry at the act of political violence from an outsider killing their guy. You go on network TV and you suggest, we can say suggest because I think Kimmel is saying that he didn't mean it explicitly, but that's what's conveyed. That's obviously offensive. It's something that should probably be walked back. And I say that as somebody who doesn't want this outcome, but I think it's important to at least just note that part.
Yeah. So let's analyze why that was even in Jimmy Kimmel's head and then how that subordinate clause of a setup came to be in so many other people's heads, including, and I heard you talk about this, Brandon Carr, who was jawboning / implicitly threatening in a way that played out exactly as he laid it out, that Kimmel should be silenced, taken off the air.
Yep.
So there was the idea after it was publicized what was written on the casings or on the bullets that the shooter fired, in one case fired at Charlie Kirk, and then 3 bullets that were unfired. Spencer Cox said this at his press conference, and this was what was actually written. And one was "Catch This Fascist," and the other one was the Italian anti-fascist song, and then there was a furry reference. There were many elements, I would say, of the left, and this was true on the left, Blue Sky, who immediately said, this does not show that he was anti-trans or anti-fascist. And now you and every regular literal person thinking about this saying, "Catch this fascist," about of a bullet doesn't show he's anti-fascist. The theory is this could be a double bank shot of the Groyper movement, which is associated with really far right, I would say fringe, but they've been invited to dine with Trump at times. They hate Charlie Kirk for not being right enough, for being pro-Israel. And so the thought was among not only the fever swamps of Blue Sky, but other areas I'll get into, that actually what it shows is that he was this Groyper, this ultra right-wing guy, plausibly. Yep. The LA Times does an interview with a supposed disinformation expert. I mean, that's her title at Boston University, Joan Donovan. She's been celebrated, but also she's been somewhat or very discredited. There's a great piece in the Chronicle of Education about how she left Harvard under a storm of acrimony. And she lays this out. Oh, no. Let me explain what all these memes are. And part of it was, it's just shit posting. It's just meaningless memes to try to confuse you. But the other assertion, and it wasn't it could, or it's plausible, or it may be, but no, what I think it is it's Groyper rhetoric. From this, not just Jimmy Kimmel, who lives in LA and maybe reads the LA Times, Jamel Hill of The Atlantic, late of ESPN. She posts this Joan Donovan interview and writes that Charlie Kirk was the victim of a white supremacist gang hit. If she's wrong, she takes that down. But I'm just laying this out there that you don't have to be a fringe lefty to get the idea, the mainstreamed idea, that this wasn't about anything about trans ideology or even fascism, that it was, in fact, what Kimmel obviously thought it was, or else he wouldn't embarrass himself by saying that or putting it in a premise that it was something like the right wing killing Charlie Kirk.
That is so well said. And it's such a great point. And in a way, it's almost humanizing Kimmel, or not humanizing, but just trying to explain how this guy wasn't evil or a liar, but he's in a bubble. And he doesn't know he's in a bubble. I would go farther, and I would say Bill Carter and a lot of people talking about this in media don't know they're in a bubble. I knew that this wasn't the case. I know people were saying they taped that show early Monday. More came out. Dude, there was enough out there to confound that particular narrative. When it immediately happened, I thought it might be a Groyper, potentially. I remember that the Groypers showed up to Charlie Kirk events and were asking aggressive questions about Israel, and that was a feature of it. So it could have been somebody like that, or I don't know, just a crazy person off 4chan. I think what's complicated with people who do big acts of terrorism or violence is that you have killers who are their own idiosyncratic. They're crazy. They're crazy. They don't map onto anything. And we argue about
truly
who did
crazy, like getting messages through the TV about grammar, which was
yes, like Son of Sam crazy. We have no way of mapping on to what they do. But the complicated thing is also there are killers who have a logic to what they're doing, and it's downstream of an ideological perspective, and it's in the air. Yeah. And I think we really struggle.
And then there's also a lot in between, right?
Yeah.
The killer who, but for the political rhetoric, wouldn't have directed his or her insanity in that particular direction.
Yeah, it's all true. I think further complicating it is that I want free speech to exist. I do think the things we say can lead to acts of violence in the world. So it's almost like I need us to pretend like that can't happen, because once we start acknowledging that happens, then people want to start putting restrictions, and the ends are not worth those particular means or whatever. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. I don't know. And now I'm getting digressive. Now I'm getting far afield. We'll get into the governmental pushback from it. I guess I'm just sort of, I like how we've set this up. I think Jimmy Kimmel said that it reveals a structural problem a bit in his show, but also in a lot of media where they don't even know what they don't know. And they're only talking to themselves. They've got a self-dealing kind of information economy. Heather Cox Richardson, who's got maybe the most popular Substack, one of the big Substacks, I believe, also conveyed this particular narrative. And it slots into what Mike Solana's called the cultural Cold War, where we have our silos and we have our truths, and what actually happened didn't matter. Now, what Solana said is it's why nobody will ever get canceled. And saying something that's not true or crazy, as long as it appeals to your particular bubble, will be fine, because we're all just talking in our particular bubbles. But this is one where it broke containment, and doing that actually has resulted in a cancellation.
Except, right, won't get canceled, except in the cases when someone has a platform and they serve a larger entity that has perhaps conflicting business interests. So while the narrow business interest of Disney is to get good ratings off of the Jimmy Kimmel show, the larger interest is about mergers. And in this case, I don't know if you got into this, not so much a Disney directive. They were very cowardly, but they were also pushed there by affiliate stations, which are very important. And Nexstar, big station group, had business before the FCC, and they took Brendan Carr's exact marching orders and almost literally executed them. They were the local station that said, this is not going to air on our air. We're taking off Jimmy Kimmel. We're going to put the pressure on the corporate entity. And that's exactly what happened. And then Sinclair, by the way, Nexstar isn't even political, right? Nexstar wants to make money. Sinclair, which is another station group that wants to make money, then joined in. And they went so far as to say, we want Jimmy Kimmel to make an apology to Charlie Kirk's family, although he didn't insult Charlie Kirk's family at all, and also give a donation to Turning Points USA. So compelling not just speech, but compelling monetary compensation to a cause that Jimmy Kimmel obviously disagrees with.
Yeah.
Could I add one more thing? That clip you played, did you see the watermark on the upper right-hand corner?
I think it was a conservative media watchdog was that
Right.
watermark. Yes.
It's called MRC. It's the Media Resource Council. I'm going to check that to make sure I'm right. But, there's a lag between the Monday night monologue and the Wednesday cancellation. And what happened was people who were set to be ginned up or honestly ginned up, but also whose job it is to be ginned up and to try to point out everything Jimmy Kimmel and those of his ilk do wrong, they went to work and they pointed the finger at this. And that's why it was on Brendan Carr's radar when he did that interview with Benny Johnson. It didn't occur naturally that the citizenry saw this or knew about this and objected in all honesty. There's another side to that, which is how many times, look at all the Charlie Kirk comments. And now many of us are up in arms in them. But how often were we paying attention to the Media Matters, which is the left-wing equivalent of the MRC, their ongoing dossier against Charlie Kirk? And as a side note, by the way, after Kirk died and so many people just felt what they had to do was write the "No, Charlie Kirk is odious" column, all they did, exactly like political operatives executing an oppo dump, all they did was went to Media Matters and just cut and pasted Media Matters complaints and occasionally embarrassed themselves greatly by getting it wrong. Well, embarrass themselves to the extent that anyone in this is capable of embarrassment.
No, I felt the same way, and we are getting digressive, and that's okay. I apologize to anybody who is usually here to hear sports media commentary, but I do think this is the biggest news story of the day. And Mike and I have a lot of thoughts on it. On the Charlie Kirk, what do we call a negative eulogy? What do we call that? Do we need to coin that?
Calumny?
Mike? Something, yeah.
A mass grave spitting?
Something like that, because you saw a lot of that. Obviously, I don't think you should be compelled to pretend that you loved a controversial political figure who's dead. If you didn't, you shouldn't be compelled to do that. But I was disappointed in the Ta-Nehisi Coates article he wrote in Vanity Fair on Charlie Kirk. And I liked the Ezra Klein column in the New York Times on Charlie Kirk, where Ezra was conveying that while he didn't agree with him, I'm not the guy to eulogize him. In many ways, I was jealous of what he built and what he was doing, and there were things to emulate. I thought that was a very mature reaction. You don't have to say I agree or this guy's a great guy or anything like that. But it was just acknowledging that he did something well, that you could learn from it. That appeared to really piss off Ta-Nehisi Coates. And he wrote the version of the column that you're talking about, where it's just a dossier of every incendiary thing that Charlie Kirk ever said. And I don't think Ta-Nehisi Coates knew much about Charlie Kirk going into this. I don't think he's got the finger on the pulse of the Zoomers who are into it. I'm not saying that I do, but that's just what it looked like. It looked like I'm going to get the worst of this particular individual. I'm going to make that the whole of their appeal.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was a mature viewpoint. I wish, and this is maybe a theme of this particular episode, is what we would want the world to be. What we would want the world to be as opposed to what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Or what we'd want the world to be, given that the world is so fallen that there are political assassinations.
Yes.
I'm anticipating you're going to.
Yes. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I would not want Charlie Kirk to be killed. I would not want Kimmel to be canceled for talking about it. All these things we would want. I would not want Brandon Carr to pressure the networks to be more pro-conservative, but I wouldn't want the networks to be so myopically, monoculturally one-sided either. These are the things we want. We don't necessarily know how to achieve it. In my hypothetical fake world, I wish Coates had approached that saying, I don't like this guy, but I also recognize his rise as a reaction to when I was riding high and when we were riding high in 2018 to 2020. And here
when they were kings. Yes.
Yes. When they were kings, when Coates was taunting white America with your president is white, because I read that column from Coates where he's talking about what a vicious racist Charlie Kirk is. And I'm reminded of the time when Coates was assailing everything white. When he said your president is white, that wasn't a compliment about Donald Trump. And it was a time where if you observe that, you would be chided and scorned for being an idiot, because obviously you're crying reverse racism. And that makes you, I don't know, a fuddy-duddy or Nazi or something. I don't know what. And yeah, it would have been nice if we got a reflective Coates that could understand or perceive the connection with his rise and the counter reaction that Charlie Kirk embodied. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, that Ezra Klein column became something what I call a negative quote, which is a quotation that's extremely useful just to dunk on and cite in the negative. The classic example being Wolf said, "You can't go home again." And that is only ever used in an instance where someone goes home again. Right. Another good example is there are no second acts in American life. Fitzgerald. This is only ever trotted out to talk about someone's second, third, or fourth act. So Ezra Klein's quote was only used, as I saw it, or his column, to dunk on it, to say, no, this guy was terrible. And now let me tell you how bad a centrist like Ezra is, or an abundance guy like Ezra is, or a rich guy like Ezra is. Let me tell you how bad he is, because did you know Charlie Kirk said the Civil Rights Act should never have happened, that Charlie Kirk said at one point President Biden maybe should be executed, and also that Charlie Kirk said black women don't have the brain processing power. Wait a minute. Charlie Kirk actually didn't say that. You're misquoting him. Doesn't matter. We're on a roll. We're going to tell you all the bad things Charlie Kirk said, even if we get a bunch of them wrong. And all I was saying on my show, and I got a lot of blowback from it because my listeners are mostly, left, center, left, some centrist. But I was saying, let's de-escalate now instead of automatically retreating to our priors. So I saw 90-something% because of the economic imperatives, but also I just think this is who people are and how they think. And if your job is having a voice in the media where you are very upset and very worried about overreach and Donald Trump, you're not going to not say it when Charlie Kirk is murdered and you say to yourself, oh my God, they're saying all these inaccurate, hagiographic things about Charlie Kirk. But I will note, a couple of the people, other than Ezra Klein, who said basically nice things about Charlie Kirk, even while disagreeing with him, were in the category of political operatives. So a woman named Z. Cohen Sanchez used to be an organizer for Bernie. Her thing now is to do the Unfuck America tour, which is to trail Charlie Kirk and debate him from the left. And she gets
How do you
Destiny to do it.
unfuck
And she,
something? Sorry, I
this-
just said it's just such
Yeah.
a funny phrase, but continue.
yeah, it's basically drafting off the momentum that Charlie Kirk has made. And she says what he's done, we disagree with everything he said. That's why we debate him. But what he's done is admirable from a political organizing standpoint. And I was listening to Megyn Kelly say that Tommy Vitor of Pod Save America sent her a very nice note without any of the, though we disagree on everything. Just this guy was a political dynamo in terms of registering. And that's what Ezra was trying to say, that someone who can use the political process without cheating in the political process. Listen, what you consider a bad faith argument, that is not a violation of politics. That is politics. So if you use argument and you use registration and you get a groundswell of people towards your cause, that's what, to some extent, is admirable, what everyone should be doing instead of just yelling at each other and retreating to their priors. And I take that point.
I do as well. And I believe that the political operatives at least have some appreciation for the incredible feat that was pulled off. We almost take it for granted that now that it's happened. But if I were to tell you in 2016, young people are just going to swing just heavy to the right, especially young men. We're going to see them shift young males about 44% in some demographics to the right. And it's going to be a campus movement that does it. You'd be laughed out of the room. That would be considered a total impossibility.
And the guy headlining this movement is a somewhat dorky, non-college graduate. So in 2016, he'd be 23-year-old who actually doesn't want the spotlight. Wow, that's a story.
Yeah, it's crazy that it happened. One of the ways it happened, I think, is something that's just hard for us in our age bucket to really relate to, that subscriber, viewer Teutonia World astutely pointed out, which is that a lot of young people just were drawn to the gamification of what Kirk was doing. This show up for the debate. I'll debate 20 people. I don't know why kids are like this, but this has almost replaced sports for them, where my son, he loves Mr. Beast stuff. He loves challenges. He keeps talking about challenges. I love that he does challenges. So they relate to it in that way, and it works for young people. There are, and this might sound crazy if you're a boomer liberal, a ton of young people who like Charlie Kirk and barely have any sort of politics or think about politics. They just think of it as a show. They just think of it as content. And we're getting so digressive, but that's how it worked. And it's an impressive feat, any kind of way you want to look at it. And it's not just reducible to being a bigot. That's not what this particular alchemy was wholly simply comprised of. But I think part of the other point I'll make on this, I think somebody like Kirk represents this other thing, where it used to be when somebody would die and they were famous, they really meant only one thing for the most part. We're in this.
This is why we call it. This is why we call people icons.
Yeah,
they reduced down to that simple, understandable iconography.
They're this. They meant that. That's it. They're a celebrity. This era, an internet celebrity, they mean different things to different people. Different parts of themselves are packaged up and sent to whoever it would fit with. To some, Charlie Kirk is the generous, open debater with a lot of empathy for the LGBT interlocutor, and he's a listener and he's not mean. To others, he's the political incendiary bigot firebrand, and they get that version of Charlie Kirk. To others, he's the organizer man who's running the Republican Party, and that's who he is. And he represents this new sort of celebrity where there's just different parts of the cow being sold off and shipped to different places. And that's this whole other, I don't even know what to call it, Mike, but it's new.
Well, you and I think a lot about media. We're even in the media, and it's all dictated by the particular medium he was on at the time. Yeah. So I've watched maybe 100 hours of Charlie Kirk at this point, and I used to talk about him on my show, but usually I would take a clip from something he said on the podcast that I almost always not just disagreed with, but would point out why this was a bad argument. And I wouldn't mind for unique clips. I would say this is symbolic of some bad arguments that are going around. But here's the analysis. When Charlie Kirk was debating on a campus, he was mostly gracious, or at least if you want to be not at all generous, Charlie Kirk, he was strategic enough to know that if you come across and bite off the heads of the people you're debating and do so without even the semblance of wanting to hear them, you're maybe going to do well in that moment and with that clip, but you're not going to generate a whole bunch of other people who want to engage with you. So in his interactions for debate, and if you want to say this was purely a cynical move, fine. But in his interactions for debate, which a lot of people saw, he was something like gracious, or at least open to hearing other debates, and often at times seemed nice to the people he disagreed with. Fine. When he's on his own podcast radio show, that's where sometimes it's talking to other people, other guests, and shooting the shit there. And sometimes he gets spun up into talking about how kids should watch public executions. But the imperative there is to appeal to the audience who can listen to Bongino, who can listen to Tucker, who can listen to Candace, who can listen to all these other more extreme voices. And therefore, he says the more extreme things. Not to excuse him, he's playing to the medium. This made him smart, right? But it also means that after he's died, you can excavate literally thousands of hours of tape that prove either point that you want to make.
That makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I think that it's hard for people. It's almost like everybody's optimized for whatever medium they're really succeeding on. And it's rare that people are adroit enough to fit it to the medium. And it appears that he was at least adroit enough, whatever you think of him. This conversation right now is happening about Kimmel, about, well, does Kimmel need ABC? I saw Kimmel's friend Bill Simmons asking that question. I would think yes, but I could be wrong. I've seen people succeed in ways that I didn't expect, but I think Kimmel is somebody who is very much optimized to be a network star, late night talk show host. And we'll get into some of that, but we're talking about this whole idea of how somebody means something good to one side, somebody means the absolute worst thing to the other side. Let's pull up the Adam Carolla clip, because I thought Adam Carolla, conservative guy, Jimmy Kimmel's good friend, had some really, really great words. I was looking for a fancier term, but it was just good. It made me feel good. It warmed my heart a little bit, Mike. Can we play some Carolla? Some warm Carolla.
It's a weird thing. The right and the left are always sort of misinterpreting things. He was inaccurate about something. It wasn't like he was necessarily attacking Charlie Kirk. He was trying to dump it on Trump and inaccurate about it. We're living in a time where something happens. Nancy Pelosi's husband gets hit with a hammer. This side says he's had a MAGA hat on. That side says he's some kind of nudist hippie. Yeah. I don't feel like it's necessary, but that's all we do. And I don't like the government getting involved. And I've heard every side of the story. And in general, I just want people to speak, and then the ratings will do the talking, and you can support them or not support them. And what you want to watch, you can watch it, or you can watch Gutfeld and listen to him bash Kimmel, or however you want to do it. That's the world I'd like to live in.
So that was really good. I do want to play the second part of the clip if we have that technological capacity. It sounds funny. It's like we're doing modern art. I'm just going to eventually turn this live stream into an hour of Carolla. We're going to listen to Loveline with him and Dr. Drew. Is that, if it's possible, I'd love to play the second part, because that was the extra humanizing side. That first part was great, and I'm glad we had it. But if it's possible to play that second part, maybe producer can tell me in the side
world
scroll.
I'd like to live in. My perspective is different just because I know Jimmy, and I know Jimmy to be a very good guy and a generous guy, and I've always said that about him. And I realized that while everyone else knows Jimmy as a caricature, I know him as a person. When I run into the people that don't know Jimmy as a person, O'Reilly or Dave Rubin, Dennis Prager, and they go, "What's up with your buddy Jimmy?" Well, I know him, so that's why I don't think of him like you think of him. But on the other hand, they think of you as a cartoon character too, and I know you. Dennis Prager's a very sweet man, lovely man, but These guys on the other side think of you as a cartoon. And then at a certain point, there's the assassin who thinks of Charlie Kirk as a cartoon character, not a dude. Yeah. I know him as a guy, sweet guy, fair guy, family guy, good American. But that guy looks at him as a cartoon character, and that's why he gets to kill him. I know Jimmy.
It's just really good. It's just really good. I think it speaks to a lot of the moment. You know, you can agree or disagree with Adam's take, but I think this idea of how some people to their audience are a human, but there's this other negative audience where they almost serve this different function. They almost serve this other function where they do function as entertainment. Jimmy Kimmel, to a lot of MAGA world, which I do believe was outraged, Mike. I do. But at the same time, he was a little morsel of entertainment for them. And there's this negative entertainment going on as well, the caricature entertainment.
Mm-hmm. So this argues for something we don't even have to say, which is that this is why you don't exact violence on actual people who are actual fathers, or for that matter, hermits who don't like anyone. Because that was another thing. He was a father of two. Important to note, but it's a little like, well, as a father of girls, I don't like sexual assault. We could all not like all those things. Adam, I love Adam. I think he's still the sharpest gun in the West, and I've witnessed his political transformation, which is to chafe against Gavin Newsom and the crackdowns, and he was very much against COVID overreach. He's correct. He prizes the interpersonal. Jimmy Kimmel is, by all accounts, just a wonderful guy interpersonally. However, most of us don't interact with Charlie Kirk or Jimmy Kimmel or Adam Carolla or Mike or Ethan interpersonally. We are to them and to their reality. We are the product of what we're putting out in the world as either rhetoric or content. And that matters. And this is why, because we are people, no one deserves violence, but a deep-seated animosity, real animosity, just based on the actual content of what someone says, I think is justified. And more, I've been coming around to the idea of, well, who you are in real life, like literally, if we touch each other, that's the real person. I don't know. It would seem to be, I'd never want to punch the other real person. But when I've had friends who our relationships have broken down to things like posting and public persona, but when their public persona is a larger percentage of our actual interactions than the couple of times I've talked to them in real life, I think that does become the real person. And I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, and we were talking about another one of these journalists who was, Karen Attia, and she claimed she was fired by the Post. I tend to think that it was one of these media martyrdom monetization schemes where you claim the Post fired you and you go to Substack, and a lot of times people like Jennifer Rubin and Jim Acosta and Terry Moran make a lot of money. And we are both of the opinion that her column's not even the one that got her fired. Just for years, she's been quite a terrible thinker and columnist. But, he pointed out what a nice person she was. And I said to him, you are such a nice person that you over-index for how nice a person they were. Like the judgment in this case probably should not factor that into account.
Yeah, nice person should factor into our sadness over somebody who is killed, but the nice person isn't worth a lot to people who are just looking at us like vending machines for content. They're pressing an E6 for the Reese's peanut butter cup of content, and that's our function.
Yeah. But also, what's the real person? If I said a lot of things that I don't believe just to get attention or ratings, and I said it a lot and more people knew me for those things, I think that would be you could argue that's who I really am as we define reality.
Well, this is getting way trippier than I thought it would get, Mike, but you've probably been accused of being a grifter. That's this common descriptor that you hear on both sides, but more on the left. And I've been accused of that. It annoys me. It annoys me that you wouldn't even give me the courtesy of hating me for my own beliefs, that you have to advance the notion that I'm just putting this out there cynically and deep down in the privacy of my home. I believe something else than what I'm saying, but they might even view that as a compliment, Mike, because they might view the things I say as so terrible that it's obviously a grift. I do think that represents a certain absence of theory of mind that I do find more a little bit on the left than I do on the right. The idea that somebody can't disagree with me, somebody can't have a different perspective than I have. It has to be a cynical work. But speaking of cynical works, segue, let's get into some of the media versus government aspect of it, because I do think that Brendan Carr has a vision that he feels idealistically, but he's working towards it cynically. I think that this is an aspect of the story that people are missing, maybe because it doesn't matter to some people. I don't know. But when I see Brendan Carr out there being a MAGA suck up, really prostrating himself to Trump in that way, I see him as similar to Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller obviously has goals and ambitions as somebody who would run immigration policy. And so he's going to try to endear himself to Donald Trump to those ends. From what I can understand of Carr, I think Carr wants to break up what he sees as the mainstream liberal media monopoly. And he wants to use levers to do that. We can set aside, or maybe we won't set aside. We'll get into how you feel about that. But that's what I think is happening here. I think they're mistaking what they're seeing for the entire thing. They think that the government right now, it's just all about I don't know, hurting anybody who hurts Trump's feelings, when there's actually a bigger project taking place, or at least being attempted.
Well, an interesting insight into Brendan Carr actually is Ben Smith. I think it was somewhere in the past year, but way before this incident, who runs Semaphore and used to be New York Times and ran BuzzFeed and used to be the New York Times media correspondent. He did a public talk with Brendan Carr. Makes sense. Smith's an expert. Carr runs the FCC. And Smith did good reporting and said, I've talked to so many people know you, and they say you're a really nice guy and affable, and who's the real Brendan Carr? And when you're not engaged in this fight, you seem really open to a whole lot of interesting ideas. And then comes your actual job and what you do. And all you do is want revenge. And when we ask you, or when anyone asks for your justification, you point out, here are the other times the left acted in a way that was deserving of revenge, or when the left enacted revenge. So, Smith says, you have this whole theory of the case that what you're doing is a way to correct for the left's excesses or calls for revenge, or the left doing it too. And then he said, why is the answer never to step out of that and chart a different path? Why is the answer to always go further down the spiral, which is an exact analog for what we saw at the post Charlie Kirk discussion? And I think the answer to that is politics, specifically 2025 politics, specifically MAGA politics. But if someone wants to say on that score, oh, the Democrats do it just as much, maybe they're right.
Yeah, I think their argument, what I've seen from MAGA world, is the idea that we aren't going to de-escalate unilaterally, that to get some fairness, we need to be able to collect some scalps. Now, that might be fairly self-serving. I do think it's such a strange conversation right now.
But it's also harder. It's also harder to create a new paradigm than just bore down further in the existing one.
Yeah, I think on the left too, it's a weird conversation, because I feel as though right now we're watching a lot of Rabbit got the gun, but the people who are most incensed by this new dynamic won't even admit that there was a rabbit, and won't even admit that they were just driving the cancellations and the ousters of their political enemies, and won't really get into, because they still believe it should have happened, that Donald Trump, as the sitting president, was kicked off all the social media platforms. And again, I don't want Kimmel canceled over this, or any singular comment. And I want to establish that. I want to make that clear. But if I'm representing the Carr view, if I'm putting on the MAGA hat, I don't have it as a prop right now, Mike. If I'm trying to make an argument from their perspective, to be clear.
They'll screenshot that and call you a grifter, friend.
Well, then I'll just have to be a total Bay Area lib, and I'll have to do the most demeaning, small-minded imitation of my MAGA character right now and go, hi, I'm Mr. MAGA Man. I don't like me no Jimmy Kimmel. I got to do that to really, distance myself. But I think what they would say is this, in the context of this Kimmel thing, right? They would say the free market, what Adam Carolla wants things to be, his vision, is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. it's not about the free market. We are living a fantasy. This idea that there's a free media market over here and there's the government over there. The fourth estate, the media, has been completely detonated. In its aftermath, anybody who succeeds is going to have the say-so of the government for their merger in order to reach however many voices that they want to reach. And then we've got this other thing going on, which is that the broadcast networks who get this largesse from the government, the FCC license to use what is arguably public airwaves, they've been taking that largesse and they've been representing propaganda for one side more overtly, perhaps year after year. And I really can't tell somebody saying that this is just going to correct itself on its own. I can't tell them that the free market is going to take care of that. I can't tell Brendan Carr that this is just going to even out, because I haven't seen it. And I also think this is an underrated subplot. I don't even know why it exists the way it does. I don't know why The View became so crazy political. I don't know why one political party on your ABC, on your CBS, Fox, I guess as a network, kind of stayed neutral. I don't know. On your NBC, how it all became one-sided. And I can at least understand a conservative attempt to try to break that up and correct it in some capacity, even if I do not like the way it's happening right now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because in our taste in all things, we've gone to super saturation and super flavors, and our wines are now big blown out flavors, and our color palettes are blown out, and our media is blown out. Part of it is, over selecting for outrage to work the algorithms, but this is what sells. Also, my friend Nick Gillespie of Reason, the libertarian magazine, would point out, we're baking into this so many assumptions of how the world just is. Why is it, he would say, that the FCC even gets a say over this? Because at one point we watch TV through rabbit ears. The reason that Trump, he criticizes CNN, but he doesn't really say, I'm going to take their license, because he knows they don't have a license. So why does ABC and CBS, a vestige of a bygone era, why do they have to kowtow before the FCC? He would say this goes all the way to all the federal agencies that approve or don't approve. And he would also say that they're doing all those approvals and disapprovals wrong. And it shows that when we go from a liberal to a conservative administration, and we put the powers in the hands of different people, they're just going to pursue power. They're not going to pursue what's right or in the public interest. The definition of what is in the public interest is so totally skewed by political party. I think that
was Jimmy Kimmel in the public interest, Mike? Answer it now. Damn it. Tell me.
He hosted that feud that he had with Matt Damon served us all. That was a long time ago.
What have you done for me lately in the public interest, Jimmy Kimmel? What is it? No,
Can I ask you a question? This has really been pressing on me. Is Rabbit Got the Gun? Is that from like Uncle Remus, Song of the South? Do I not know this phrase? Is this?
I don't know the etymology. I just hear other people say
Is this duck season, rabbit season?
Don't make me reveal how uncool I am. That's not fair. That's not fair.
I've never heard Rabbit Got the Gun.
It gets said. It gets said a lot. It gets said a lot in a sports context. It gets said a lot, and
I love it.
There's not an acknowledgement that the overdog, that today's underdogs once were the overdogs. I would just like an overdog to acknowledge that, and then we can get on to how things should be. But they don't want to admit that they were bullying the other side. They don't want to admit the power that they held. It just doesn't serve their image of themselves, I suppose. But I think there's this other thing where it's a dangerous situation we're in. I don't think we've really reckoned with the situation that we're in. I wrote about it on my Substack, House of Strauss, subscribe today. But when I was growing up, there really was a media, and it really could stand on its own, and it made a lot of money. It was the fourth estate, and you really couldn't bully it from the position of the FCC like this, or from the administration like this. We're in a new paradigm where anybody in media is desperate, and they're just trying to claw their way to some sort of advantage. And they need the government say so. And we can say we do not like the jawboning, and we do not like Trump overtly using his leverage. But I believe anybody in the seat is just going to use that leverage. And that's the new paradigm, that whatever media exists, big media has an element of having to cater to whoever is in power. That sucks, but I don't think it's going away. And I don't think that we've necessarily digested it outside of just freaking out about Trump doing it.
Yeah. And there was an interesting column today by Noah Millman, I think. Maybe it was yesterday. And he said what the Jimmy Kimmel thing reminded me of was James Bennett. James Bennett's firing from the New York Times. Why? Because ouster, not technically
whatever
fired,
it was.
when he ran the Tom Cotton op-ed, because that showed that all of these institutions were susceptible to pressure. And up until that moment, in the Bennett case, it came from within. But up until that moment, maybe we thought of the media just as you were articulating. When we were younger, it was an important thing and it was a solid thing and you couldn't really push it around. And that's when they said, oh, we can be pushed around, even by young people within our ranks who are calling us racist. And so now we're seeing every bit of media, all the institutions, the colleges, the law firms saying to the world, push us around, it will work, or just saying to the administration. And he understands that, right? He understands power. He understands pressure points. And once the signal goes out, your enemies are going to exploit it.
Yeah, I think that's what's happened. And I don't think that we were honest about where those pressure points were in that era. And there's a lot that there wasn't honesty about. Again, I might be getting digressive. I observed the New York Times in those days as a competing tech company going after other people in tech and other tech companies. And I saw it in some ways as an economic fight. It's a bit of a digression, but I just.
Oh, you mean their coverage of the
Yes.
tech world got very sour and very negative?
Yes.
And yes.
Because the New York Times is an app, it's they're competing for the same territory, and that was happening. And there's also, I think, a governmental impact on norms in media that were shifting more to the left direction, where you could get sued by the Justice Department more easily if you're seen as more of a bigoted venture, or people are accused of, I don't know, hostile work environment. I mean, all these things tilt coverage. And I guess part of what I'm observing right now is that this isn't good. What is happening, but a lot of the people who are most incensed about it, who are in that bubble, that Bill Carter bubble. I apologize to Bill Carter. You wrote some amazing books, but I'm just using you as the example today. They almost didn't notice a lot of this stuff because they agreed with it happening. And now that it's happening in this other direction, it all seems like it's so new and a huge breaking of norms.
That very thing we were talking about Jimmy Kimmel thinking that this was that there was good evidence that there was a groyper, Jamel Hill. That's a very similar phenomenon in that they didn't notice when it was happening, when their enemies were being afflicted by, say, the conspiratorial brain rot. And they would issue reports and they say, you understand that human beings are susceptible and we're tribal and we sense patterns where there are no patterns. And so this is why, when they're being generous, so this is why your poor deluded uncle fell for QAnon. Well, now that the crazy groyper, or what turns out to be, and I would think the evidence was there, the far-fetched groyper theory gains credence and traction and purchase within these other circles. You've explained to us how your enemies are susceptible to it as humans. You weren't? No, you were. You were.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there a dehumanization there? If we were generous to Kimmel, saying he was just misled by being in his bubble, but was there an element of not having any theory of mind outside your bubble to the point where even when their guy gets killed, it's got to be them? I mean, that's sort of a crazy, when that becomes your Occam's razor. I don't know if you're thinking about your enemies like people, or people who might react negatively in the way people do. I put it on Kimmel. I put it on Carter to an extent, that there's this inability to see why that would piss them off. If we reverse the roles, I think they would very easily see why that would be incendiary, to blame a political movement for an enemy killing its popular leader.
Yeah. And also there is the pattern of, after I say this, I'm going to think to see if I'm fair to the right or if I'm being too fair to the right, but
we don't even know. This is a very dorm room conversation we're doing. Yeah. This is also part of the media, folks. We don't know if we're doing a great job or a horrible job. I think we're doing a great job. A listener texted me right now. I saw it. They said this is a great conversation. So let's ride with that, Mike. You were saying.
Yeah. I heard you saying that on your last podcast. Is this a good podcast? I don't even know what a good podcast is.
Those are often the best ones. But yes.
Yeah, I know. Or often it's like track down a road that you can't come back from. So this is what I was going to say. It was such the pattern that after there was a high profile political killing or political attack, that many in the left would talk about the motivations of the attacker, and they'd always be in line with the right, even when full-blown insanity was a much better explanation. So with the Paul Pelosi attacker, there were definitely thoughts in the ether that put that particular imperative in his mind, but it was the addled nature of his mind that brought about that attack. But the other thing that went on is when there was pretty decent evidence that, I'm not saying it's a 50-50 split or even a 55 or 60-40, but there was so much decent evidence that there were left-wing attacks, and those were never really grappled with, right? The Brett Kavanaugh, very credible threat, the shooting at the baseball game, a few others. These were attacks, or the Trump assassination attempts. You know, there wasn't that same, you never heard the phrase stochastic terrorism, which is something that the left often used to explain why any criticism is pretty much violence. It's going to lead to violence. It's just violence with a multisyllabic layer attached to it. Never heard that applied to any of the other stuff. And there just was, I do think, a dishonesty. And the last thing I'll say about, it's very hard not to get sucked into rebutting what you just know are false assertions, like JD Vance saying, oh, sure, maybe the right has a little crazy, but it's almost all from the left. And you look at the statistics and you look at empirical evidence. You're like, not true, not true. Look at all this evidence that shows it's disproportionately from the right. I would say it doesn't matter. Like, unless the violence is 99-1, even if it's 70-30, and I don't even need to debate what the ratio is, why focus on the ideology to root out the violence instead of focusing on the violence?
I would tend to agree with that. I'm thinking about that. I'm digesting that.
But
why does
the
it
FBI
matter?
has agents who look at Muslim terrorist groups. I don't know if they're right or left, and they look at neo-Nazi terrorist groups. And that's what they should be doing. They shouldn't just be saying we've prioritized the neo-Nazis. They should look at everyone who's a potential terrorist group. I don't know what the FBI could do these days, but that's what they should do.
Well, I do think there's this complicated, I hope I articulate this correctly. It's almost like problems that the media indulges and makes excuses for get worse. And because the media, I'm just saying the media generally was more focused on the right, and in their own minds, the left couldn't be a problem. I do think that there is some, can I pronounce this word? Metastasization. Did I pull that off? I don't know. I believe there was some metastasization because there was so much from the top. This doesn't exist. This isn't a thing. If you express a concern about Antifa, all your journalistic peers are going to mock you as an idiot because that doesn't exist. That sort of pressure, I do think, allowed that problem to build. And it's this thing of whichever gets indulged more can become more of a problem, and whichever has more of the spotlight can become less of a problem because it's easier to fix problems that you're aiming for and that you're admitting.
Right. And I can't tell you how many MSNBC segments I saw where they accurately quoted the director of the FBI saying right-wing terrorist groups or neo-Nazis or white supremacist terrorist groups have become the number one problem. But that doesn't mean the only problem. And there was a case where someone shot at Cincinnati FBI headquarters with a staple gun. So he was an anti-FBI, I guess, white supremacist guy. His fate was that he was killed by the FBI. And it was just treated as another one of 100 stories that the right, the radical right, some version of the right wants to kill you. And when that gets embedded in your consciousness, we as the only species that could make up stories about threats as opposed to seeing our rival in front of us baring our teeth, we make up stories and are also the only species that can attack to preempt the attack. Things won't go well. And I really do think many of my friends on the left were over convinced that most of the right, a larger part of the right than actually existed in real life, would, if allowed, kill them.
I have seen that. And oddly, I've seen it more. And this goes back to the boomer weird aspect of it, more among the boomer tribe. But I'm free associating. We're okay. We got to take a question. We have Ryan with his hand up. We've been yapping. We've been monopolizing. Let's try to get in, get out, make this clean, stick the landing. Ryan, what do you got for us?
I'll do my best to help with sticking the landing. I think this was a great conversation. And Mike, I think the way, especially, these last couple of minutes, I agree with you. I don't think it's a right or left thing. It's a violence thing. We live in the most violent country in the world. And most specifically with gun violence. One thing that wasn't mentioned was the recent attack that was meant to be the NFL headquarters, that, ultimately, yeah. It's just, yeah, that's all unfortunate. To bring up a couple of lighter topics, I joined a little late, so I don't know if it was mentioned. But it was mentioned in the chat by Ted Danson, aka Trace. The Cardi B, Stefan Diggs, soon to be child. And all I was thinking about was the Vikings locker room interviews about who you wouldn't want to date your sister.
Well,
any quick commentary on that before we gotta go?
That is a great clip. And this maybe goes back to when I had Pablo on a week ago, because mystery is this product that we don't get enough of, that all the Vikings players were knowingly reacting, saying that they wouldn't want Diggs to be in that role, but they weren't telling you why. It's just catnip. You go, what the hell is this guy doing? What don't I know about? What won't they tell me? But I'll say this much as a callback, now that Stefan Diggs is going to be a father, Mike, really no political violence against anyone, but especially no political violence or any sort of violence, not even on the football field, aimed at one Diggs. The man is a father, Mike. He's a father. You got to keep that in mind.
Is he a Patriot? Is he on the Patriots this year?
Yes.
Yeah. He's not doing too much with the Patriots, but he's scoring in other realms, so that's good.
Yeah, he's a lot of different teams. Might be a little
his Maryland career. He was, remember, coming out of high school or in college. I mean, no one had more talent than Stefan Diggs, and he put it together for a little bit of time. But yeah,
receiving a little mysterious. I don't know what tricks the cornerback. I don't know. I don't know how they get open, but I don't know when they lose it. It's the hips.
It's the hips. One other quick one.
Right.
One other quick one. Jonathan Kuminga. What do you think is going to happen there with the Warriors? Their agent seems to be really leaning in that he's just going to take the qualifying offer, which quite frankly would probably hurt the Warriors more than anything.
I do not have a prediction on the Kuminga. I just got a text from some people in Warriors media during this. I didn't even want to read it. I didn't even want to absorb it. The Kuminga situation, maybe that's for next week. I will come up with my definitive Kuminga take. I've said before, I think he should have taken the money earlier. I think that the explosion of salaries in the NBA, as was told to me by an NBA executive, it hasn't really hurt the motivation of the players who get the big contract. It's messing with the guys who miss that game of musical chairs and see themselves of a similar status as the guys who got paid out, and then whine and pout and create the kind of toxic situation that we see in Golden State. So I'll come up with a take about it. Great stuff as always. I thought this was a great conversation, everybody. I do. I hope we healed the country, Mike. Do you think we healed the country just a little bit? Not Carolla level. Not Carolla level.
I hope the country is a little looser in the hips, if not more open in the heart for all of our differences.
There we go. Thanks so much, Mike. Everybody check out The Gist. Fantastic stuff. House of Strauss, Chat BCC, sportspredict.com, non-gambling, gambling picks. I'll brag, 96 smart rating before I come crashing down to earth. I'm picking them well right now. So, I need to represent that before it all goes kablooey. Everybody take care. See ya.